Hey guys, Michelle Glass here, and our topic for this presentation is metabolism. Now, very often we think about metabolism as like the food that we eat and then the calories that we burn, and that is definitely part of metabolism, but this term is actually more inclusive. So the term metabolism is referring to all of the chemical reactions that are happening inside of the cell. If we talk about metabolism as this term for all chemical reactions happening inside of the cell, we can then further characterize those chemical reactions based on whether they're anabolic or catabolic. Anabolic reactions are synthesis reactions. So this is where you're making something new. So, and here you're taking, molecule A plus molecule B, and you're adding that together to make a new molecule AB. Catabolic reactions are the opposite. These are the breakdown or the decomposition reactions. So notice we're just going in the reverse. So we're starting with our product AB and we're breaking it down into its components A and B separately. If you're having trouble remembering which type is anabolic and which type is catabolic, the term catabolic has that same prefix as the term catastrophic. And so that might help you to remember that catabolic is referring to the breakdown sort of or decomposition sort of reactions. Now, as we are looking at that equation for the reaction, notice that you have your reactants on the left side of the arrow, and then the products are shown on the right side of the arrow. And we see that that is true no matter if we're talking about an anabolic or a catabolic reaction. Also, if you didn't pick up on it, I'm using the RxNS abbreviation for reactions because that's too much for me to write down. So that's a really good shorthand for you to use. When we are talking about water, we will see that one of the important properties of water is that it's very reactive. And we're going to see water playing a role in a lot of the chemical reactions that are happening in the cell. Now, here, this information is presented in our chapter 2 for our anatomy textbook, and this information is presented more in our chapter 3 of our biology textbook, but we are getting there very shortly, so go ahead and pay attention. When we're talking about water being reactive, we have two types of reactions that involve water. So the anabolic version is called a dehydration synthesis reaction. Dehydration synthesis. So right there in the name, we have the term synthesis. So that tells us that we're talking about an anabolic reaction. So here we're seeing if you have molecule AH, and A here is generic, just like in algebra where X can stand for any number. A here is representing any molecule there, and BOH. Dehydration synthesis is where you dehydrate or you remove a water molecule, and in the process you make something new. So we're synthesizing our molecule AB. So we've pulled out a hydrogen and we've pulled out an oxygen and a hydrogen, or an OH group. And collectively then if you pull out two hydrogens and one oxygen, you have your water molecule. The reverse of this is what is called a hydrolysis reaction. And notice at the end of this word, you have the ending lysis, which means to break. And we're going to see this phrase used throughout the course. If you want to mispronounce this, you can call it hydrolysis. And so then you're hearing that you're breaking the water apart. So this is a breakdown, decomposition, or catabolic reaction. So here we're looking at our equation, but in the reverse direction. So you're starting with AB and a water molecule. You're going to actually lyse or break apart the water molecule into its components, hydrogen and hydroxide group, and use that then to break apart your AB into an A and a B. Okay, and so dehydration synthesis reactions are opposites to hydrolysis. Hydrolysis is opposite to dehydration synthesis reaction. We can actually represent this as a reversible reaction. So notice we don't have an arrow going just in one direction, but we have arrows going in both directions, which is how we represent reversible reactions. And so again, your hydrolysis and your dehydration synthesis reactions are opposites of each other. We see this happening all the time in cells because you're going to eat food and you're going to break it down into your components, and then you're going to use those components to build the molecules that that cell needs at that time. Now, in order to, be able to do these chemical reactions, some of these reactions are going to actually require energy to happen. And in other cases, you're making energy that can be stored in the cell as a chemical energy. So we need to take just a few minutes here and define what we mean by this term energy. Energy is talking about the ability to perform work in the cell, because we're chemists or biologists, not chemists. That's what we're talking about here. Now we have what's described as potential energy. This is the energy that is stored. So you can compare this to like plugging in your cell phone at the end of the day. You're charging it up. You're storing, a day's worth of use in that battery. So when you charge up your battery, then you have potential energy in that battery to use once you're off, unplugged, right? Okay, and then the kinetic energy is the reverse of this. The kinetic energy is the energy of work or of motion. And so this analogy here would be when you're off the charger and then you're actually using your phone and draining your battery. When we talk about chemical reactions happening, and we're talking about going from our reactant to our product, so here I'm representing what type of reaction would this be? Am I showing you a dehydration synthesis or a hydrolysis? Okay, so I didn't put an arrow, so that might be a little bit confusing for you, but remember you're going to go from your reactants always to your products. And so because we're going to be breaking apart that water molecule in order to break apart the AB molecule, this is showing us a hydrolysis reaction. Now, the amount of energy that is required to actually get this reaction to happen is what's called activation energy, or energy of activation. So you can reverse it and say it either way. If we're talking about this in your lab or in the cell, usually this activation energy is going to require some heat or give off some heat, and it's going to require some time for these reactions to happen. And cells can't allow there to be a big combustion of heat or a big input of heat into a chemical reaction, and cells can't wait hours, days, months, years for reactions to happen. We need our chemical reactions in cells to happen fast, but also to happen quickly. And so we can't wait for this huge amount of activation energy that's typically required. So in our cells, what we see happening is our bodies, our cells, are making special molecules called enzymes. And the job of our enzyme is to actually lower that activation energy. It's basically making it easier for this chemical reaction to take place. Very often what we see is that your molecules are going to pair up with the enzyme, and then based on the shape, it's either going to stress out the bond, making it easier to break, or bring those molecules closer to each other so that that bond can occur more easily. We're going to be talking more about enzymes as we go along with the course, so this is just our real quick introduction to this idea. The key thing about enzymes is that they are lowering that energy of activation. They are speeding up those reaction rates, and they are basically required for all of our cellular reactions. So what we can see is a cell can control what type of reactions can occur based on what enzymes are available. So a big part of our expressing of our genetic information is turning on enzymes or turning off enzymes. So a lot of the communication that's happening in the cell, whether it's to control the genetic information or signaling from a neuron from the nervous system, it's in large part telling the cell whether it can have an available enzyme or not. And in controlling the enzymes that are available and active, then we're controlling what type of chemical reactions that cell can do. So we'll see this conversation coming up repeatedly. Another way that people often describe enzymes is this phrase at the bottom of the screen, biological catalysts. Catalysts are molecules that are part of the chemical reaction, but they're not changed in any way. So what we'll see is that those enzymes can be used repeatedly They're not just used up in one reaction and then that's it. So we can use them more than one time in the cell. And again, this is our real quick introduction. We're going to have whole sections where we talk just about enzymes.